Welcome to Leading with Heart, the podcast where leadership meets humanity. I'm your host, Sara Valentine, and in each episode, we'll explore how to bring heart into the way we lead, live, and love. HEART stands for hear, empathize, acknowledge, respond, and think. These 5 actions may sound simple, but when practiced consistently, they can transform the way you show up as a leader in the workplace and beyond. So whether you're leading a team, leading a family, or simply leading yourself, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Heart Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Sara Valentine. Today's episode is incredibly meaningful to me. I'm joined by my professor from the Crummer Rollins Executive MBA program, retired Lieutenant General Dr. Mark Hertling, a transformational and servant leader whose impact spans the battlefield, the boardroom, and the classroom. Dr. Hertling recently released a deeply personal book titled If I Don't Return, a collection of letters he wrote to his sons during a time of war. These letters weren't written for publication. They were written in an uncertainty and responsibility and love. And I can't think of a more powerful way to talk about leadership than through legacy, vulnerability, and the values we choose to pass on. On this podcast, we talk about the HEART framework of leadership. Hear, empathize, acknowledge, respond, and think. As I read and read your book, I kept seeing those principles show up in your letters, not just as a military leader, but as a father, thinking deeply about the kind of men you hoped your sons would become. Dr. Hertling, thank you so much for being on the Heart podcast.
Sara, it is an honor and a pleasure to be with you on this podcast. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's a great subject we're going to talk about. I really appreciate your model and what you're trying to do to help other people connect and lead with love.
So your book, If I Don't Return, is based on the letters you wrote to your sons while deployed. That title alone carries a lot of weight. What prompted you to begin writing those letters?
Well, this is going to seem to be a strange story, but back in 1990, when I was a young major, I was in a cavalry squadron, which means we were doing reconnaissance for a division. So it's a unit of about 800 or 900 soldiers who do reconnaissance and information gathering, intelligence gathering for a unit of 20,000. And we are always out front in the cavalry. So one night, we were told to listen to AFN network. We were living in Germany. And in that announcement in November of 1990, we were told that we would be deploying to Saudi Arabia and in order to provide a backstop for what was happening with Iraq's invasion of Kuwait at the time. It was a surprise to everyone. It put us all through cheetah flips, as we like to call it, where we didn't know what was going to happen. And the next day when we went in, we got an intelligence briefing. We were told at that intelligence briefing that the cavalry unit would probably suffer 50% casualties because of the mission and the fact that we were going against Saddam Hussein's army that had just finished an 8-year war with Iran, and they had used chemical weapons against their own citizens, the Kurds, in a place called Halabja, and they were the 4th largest army in the world at the time. So given that prediction that we had a chance of 50% casualties in our unit, I started thinking about, given that coin flip, what would happen if I didn't come home? Who would teach our 2 young sons at the time how to be men, how to grow into a society? And they were 7 and 10 at the time. So
Wow.
when I deployed, what I started to do prior to the war beginning, prior to combat beginning, we were in the desert for about a month and a half, waiting for the war to start and doing the different things that you have to do as an Army unit. I just started picking random subjects on a daily basis and writing a 1-page journal entry to the 2 sons that if I weren't to return, someone could give that book to them. Um, and it had all kinds of bizarre subjects, anywhere from thoughts on friendship and culture and marriage and the kind of things that a 7 and 10-year-old probably aren't thinking about, but that someday they would. And that's how this all started. So I had a
Yeah.
very big journal, a book that was a green army notebook that I was writing every day. And when I returned home, the two boys were only a year older when I got back home, and they didn't want to read a philosophical bunch of journal entries. So I threw it in a footlocker, where it stayed for about the next 30 years until our youngest son asked my wife, Sue, um, if he could see the journal, unbeknownst to me. And when he pulled it out, what I didn't know is he was going to type up the journal entries and present it to me. Now that this younger son is very interested in history of families and
Hmm.
genealogy and stuff. So when he gave it to me on Christmas Day in 2024, it was a surprise. First of all, he had typed it up, put it in a box, gave it to me, put some pictures in it. And he said, Dad, my brother and I realized what you were trying to do back then. You were preparing us if you didn't come home with this book. And he said, but now you have five grandsons and two granddaughters.
Hmm.
Now we've got to continue to pass on that legacy to them. So why don't you write some more in what your life has been like from 1991 until 2025? So I started writing after he gave me the book. And what was great about it, Sarah, and I'm giving you a very long introduction. What was great about it was there was an automatic outline of what I
Hmm.
wanted to write, because what I decided to do was take each subject that I had written about, to include the combat time, because I had seen two more deployments to Iraq,
Right.
and just talk about what I thought 35 years later on those same subjects and how my thought processes had changed. Um, and that's how the book originated
Hmm.
and what it consists of now. So it's each section has a journal entry that's about a
Right. And
page
then the
long,
reflections
and then
piece.
the reflection, which are several pages. Well, can be several pages long or very short too.
Yeah. Yes, I have so far I think the friendship and the faith are my two favorites of the journal
So
entries.
you're into it.
I am into
You
it,
started
yes.
reading it. Okay. Yeah. All
um
right.
as I was reading your book, it struck me the humanity that shines through the letters and then the reflections. They show strength. Um but they also show humility and care. And that unfortunately is rare in leadership today. So it gives me the thought of how do you, when I'm reading your book, it comes across very clear that you feel vulnerability is important in leadership.
Yeah, well, I
Um,
mean, the two traits you just named, humanity and care, or I'm
mhm,
sorry, humility and care, are probably two of the most important values in my book for
mhm,
leadership. Because, no one really likes well, I can't say that. Some people do, but I personally don't like a swaggering leader that doesn't take care of or care for their people, their families, and care for the job that they're doing.
mhm,
So yeah, those are pretty important traits, I think.
right. I find early in my career, vulnerability was a um, something that was taboo. I didn't see a lot of leaders lean into that. I see it more today because it's becoming a easier conversation with leaders. But it's definitely present in the journal entries and definitely in the reflections. So far, as I'm reading your book, looking back, do you think these letters are a form of leadership themselves?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. It's funny that you say that because, um, when the manuscript was sent off to a publisher, I mean, it was a funny situation because one of a Crummer student, Bob Ronska, who you've
Hmm.
met, Dr. Bob
Yeah, Navy
Ronska,
Bob.
maybe Bob. I asked him, I said, how was your publisher? Because he's published a couple books.
Hmm.
And he said,
Beyond
oh,
the
yeah, you ought
Sea,
to,
great read.
yeah, yeah. He said, you ought to talk to this guy, Andy Simons, who's the publisher and the owner of Ballast Books. So I sent the manuscript off to him, and he was asking me, he said, do you want help with the editing? Do you want us to help you write the thing? I said, no, it's already written. You can take a look at it and edit it, but I don't want the journal entries to change a bit because those were the originals. I said, you can edit some of the reflections if you think I'm too wordy or I get off. And truthfully, they didn't edit a lot. I mean, there was possibly some syntax errors and grammar errors and things like that
And
the
you say
editors
that
helped.
in the book, spelling
Yeah,
errors and all.
yeah, but the thing that I had a conversation with Andy after the book was published and we got the first copies back, and we were sitting around talking about it, and he said, he said we mostly focus on books from the military, all different kinds of military books. He says, and when you sent me yours, I thought, okay, it's going to be a war book if I don't return. And he said, it's really not. He says it's a leadership book. He says it's how do you live your life book. He said, and then, then he gave me a very bizarre compliment. He said, he said, you're kind of a stoic. He said, you're like Marcus Aurelius, who just kind of looks around and sees the things going on around him and comments on life. And he said, that's what makes this book pretty special. He says, yeah, there's a section on war in it, but most of the time you're just kind of reflecting and analyzing
Hmm.
both the good and the bad, the successes and the foibles that occur in anybody's life.
Yes.
And so I took that as a big compliment.
Yes. I particularly like the part about emotions. So I kind of knew you were an emotional guy. Didn't realize how much until I read
Yeah,
that part. But I love that. My whole career, I've been told I feel too much. I'm too emotional. So to hear you say, hey, it's important for people to see your emotions, but you're responsible with how you manage those emotions, was very impactful for me as a female leader,
yeah.
to hear that from a male leader that I look up to.
Well,
I really, really liked that part.
it's interesting because as a male leader, I'll tear up at something, and my family, always says, "Oh, there's, my wife will look at me and she kind of smiles, and I know what she's thinking. And our kids understand that I'm going to get emotional
Hmm.
at things like graduations or weddings or the happy events, and
Right.
it's a happy kind of emotion, and people like to see when you're connecting. And you know me, Sarah. I mean, we've been together now for almost a year in the classroom, and I laugh loud, and I get touched by human things that human beings go through, and
Yeah.
I'm passionate about what we're studying when I teach the courses to your class. And so, yeah, life is meant to be lived to the fullest, and you can only do that through exhibitions of emotion, I think. But what you were saying before is, I think, unfortunately, women sometimes get a bad rap, but
Mm.
I would tell you that men also do if they're emotional. There are some that
Oh,
like, oh my
yes.
gosh, here he goes again. So
Yes.
I've come to the conclusion of I don't care. It's who I am and it's the way I feel. So
Good for you.
it's the empathy part of your heart, right?
That's right. That's right. I love the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. She is the CFO of Meta. She
Hmm.
talks about that a lot. And yeah, I believe men also get the same response if they're overly emotional. I try to tell people in HR, there's an H before the R on purpose
Hmm.
because we're all human, and to be human is to feel
Yep. Yep.
100%.
And I just hold on. I just read this book, and it's "We the Women" by Nora O'Donnell. Have you heard
Uh-huh.
of this?
I have heard
It's
of
very
it.
good, and she talks a lot about um, the emotion, especially in women who are shaping America. And it's a very good, first of all, it's a good leadership book, but it's also a good um, book for women and men, I
Mm-hmm.
think, because it's a great story of history, but also a great understanding of the sexes, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'll have to give it a read. I love to read. I
Well,
try to
read my
read.
book first, though. You got to read my
I'm
book
going to
first.
finish your book. I'm almost done. I just time has been it's been a busy season.
Yeah.
I know the book isn't it's around the wartime, but it's not a war book, it's a leadership book, but I got to ask the question. So, during war, I was a military wife for 9 years. I did two deployments with my husband at the time.
Yeah.
And deployments were full of uncertainty, you know, and in business and life, uncertainty shows up differently, but the responsibility feels very similar at times. What does If I Don't Return teach us about leading when outcomes are unknown?
Yeah. In either crises or
Hmm.
disaster. You know,
Yeah.
crises when things are changing and craziness is going on, but also disaster when something traumatic happens to individuals or to groups. Um, it teaches us that the caring piece can can often be a burden. You know, when we hear the word caring as you use in your model, it's all about really taking care of folks. That's what it transcribes to be. But caring can also be tough love. Caring can be training. It can be putting people in tough situations so they grow. It can be challenging them and holding them to a high standard. It's not always
Yes.
soft caring.
Yep.
You know, sometimes it's hard caring. And
Yep.
then you get into situations where disaster strikes and you realize that it takes another special kind of caring, that you've got to be in the midst of things, that you have to really tune in to your understanding, your empathy of what someone's going through. Uh, 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 I I don't know. I don't think I ever told you this, but I have mentioned this on other podcasts. I have a box on my desk, and
With
on
the
the
note
top of it,
cards, with the cards.
right. Did I show you those?
No, I read it in your book.
Okay, well, this is the Make It
That's
Matter
the book.
box.
That's the Make It Matter. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a wooden cigar box. Three people have it, and it was a result of us losing soldiers
Hmm.
in combat. And when that happens, you have these memorial services. And our at the time, our division commander Marty Dempsey, he wanted to comfort and provide care to those who had lost one of their buddies, one of their
Hmm.
comrades. And he couldn't quite, put his finger on how to address them after the memorial service. Um, and finally, he came up with the phrase, make it matter, make their sacrifice matter. You know, don't give up, continue to do the hard things, live their life because they can't live it for themselves. And that was the expression that we all came to realize was the epitome of caring. If we lose somebody, that you carried on by making it matter for others. Now, as you've read in the book, there's 253 cards in this box, and they all kind of look like, I don't want to spill them all on the ground, but they kind of look like that with individual pictures on them.
Hmm.
And on the back, it lists their family members, where they were born, how they died, and where they died. And every day I'd pick a couple of those out of that box and just think about how their death occurred. Well, in 2007 or 2008, my last combat tour, when we first started doing it in
Hmm.
2003 and four, when we were together. So they would have been probably in their 40s,
Hmm.
at least. And what happened between the time they were 18 and now 40 years old? What could have been in their life? What
Right.
what jobs would they have had? What children would they have birthed? Those kind of things. So that is what drives the make it matter, the importance of that in terms of caring for those who are no longer with us.
Right. I do talk about caring and accountability in one of the episodes. It's either the A or the R, where accountability is an act of care. And
Yeah,
a lot of times leaders shy away from that. Um, I try to teach leaders to lean into it because accountability is an act of care.
yeah,
Um, for the women and men in your box of what make it matter, I feel the same about people that I have to terminate in a job because it's the hardest decision any leader has to make in business. Not in wartime, but in business. And I often think about, did I do it right? Did I care for them in that moment? Because I was taught by Cynthia Howell, my mentor, to keep humanity in every interaction, no matter what that person did, and treat it like an act of care, even though you're
yeah,
separating them.
yeah.
So I appreciated that part of the books as
You know,
well.
one of the things I'll tell you, this is not in the book, but I'll share it with you since you talked about terminations. Uh, I had a really good soldier who got in trouble, and he did some things which required us to throw him out of the army
Yeah.
with a bad discharge. And it was interesting because I had a conversation with him, and the conversation centered around how he had disappointed so many people, and he was a young man. And I said to him, I said, you have got to really take a look at yourself and take accountability for who you are and what you're doing to others. And of course, I think he was 20 or 21 years old at the time, and I was an old colonel. But, I tried to give the fatherly lesson,
Hmm.
and I didn't think it worked, to be honest with you. But lo and behold, about 15 years later, I get an email from this guy. And he said, your tough love turned my life around. He said, I now have a great wife. I've got two kids. I've got a job that I love. I'm going to work every day. But he said, I think about how I disappointed how I disappointed people.
Hmm.
I think about that every day, and I don't ever want to do that again.
Oh.
So, it's good results can come of dismissals
Hmm.
if you do it the right way and
Yeah.
really take the human condition into account.
Yeah. I've had a few contact me back. One apologized. I was like, that's not necessary at all. So that sat with me, had impacts. Um, One part of the book that really stands out to me is when you talk about faith
Mm.
and how it shaped your thinking and leadership. Um, Sometimes leaders really shy away from being vocal about their faith. I have, in the past, as HR, I walk a careful line. But the older I get, the more I really own it and own Christ.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about faith in your book, I loved how you honored other faiths, right? From other people, other walks of faith. I loved that. Um, but I also like how you talk about it and how it helped you get clarity or courage or and having that strong moral compass. Um, does I think my question is, does your faith did it help you lead soldiers and make
Oh,
those difficult decisions?
gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, relying on not only your values, which sometimes can be faith-based,
Mm-hmm.
the respect for other people, for the respect for that spark that's in other people, that's only provided because of who we are, um, and understanding that people believe different things, but for the most part, everybody wants to do the right thing
Mm-hmm.
according to how they're raised, but also learning a lot from other religions that sometimes you don't understand. Um, I grew up, as I say in the book, I grew up a Roman Catholic and
Hmm.
in a strict Catholic family. And
Yes,
I
I
would
remember you saying you got your knuckles slapped. I was like, oh,
Oh
he
yeah. Oh, the
really was
nuns.
Catholic.
Oh yeah. The nuns. I grew up. I grew up in a well. We I went to a Catholic grade school, an all boys Catholic high school, and then I went off to West Point. So I was in an all boys at the time before the change in the Supreme Court.
Hmm.
We would all go to our different chapels, but we
Right.
would march to those chapel formations. So yeah, faith as a Catholic was always there, but it wasn't until I started uh, mingling with first other soldiers and then other nations
Hmm.
that I really had an interesting feel for what different faiths do. Um, yeah, and to go back to your question of did it help in terms of leadership? Yeah, I think so. Because it also opens that door to how all people are different.
Hmm.
And you have to understand where they're coming from in their faith. Um,
Yep.
I had something I wanted to say and I forgot what it was, but it really, one of the things is we're more similar than we're alike. And, or excuse me, we're more similar than we are not alike, as Maya Angelou says. I think this is in the book, but I mentioned how uh, a Jewish person once told me when we were discussing the Arab-Israeli crisis
Hmm.
that they both greet themselves with the phrase
Shalom.
shalom
Hmm.
or salam alaikum.
Hmm.
So close in terms of the languages, which both mean peace.
Peace. Yeah.
And they both want it,
Hmm.
and almost using the same words to get it.
Yes. Yeah, that I really enjoyed that section of the book for sure, because I do think a lot of leaders struggle to bring their values and faith into leadership authentically. Um, and I was blessed with a woman of faith as my first teacher in HR, so that helped ground me. And I really don't think I would have gotten as far as I have in my career without my faith,
Yeah.
because God opened doors that I never could would have gotten to on my own. That's what I know. Um,
You
in
know,
the
it's interesting you say that because I think it's not only our own faith,
Yeah,
but the fact that we realize others have their own faith too. I
yeah,
mean, even atheists and agnostics,
hmm,
they believe in certain things. So you have to respect that belief and try and figure out
yeah,
more what that means to them and how it creates their pathway in life.
yes. And I think it's very possible for someone of a different faith or background to respect and honor one another. It happens to me all the time, all the time. Um, a member of my cohort at Crummer was afraid that I was going to be a little bit of a Bible thumper as soon as I started talking about faith, and they have been pleasantly surprised. And now we enjoy each other so much. They're so funny. So I think as long as you respect and honor others, I think faith belongs in almost every conversation. But you know,
Well, one of the things I'll tell you that I know this isn't in the book because I purposely shied away from this, but I once had to counsel a chaplain because I asked him to provide a prayer at he was speaking at a formation for something the Army calls a change of command, and you know what that is. It's
hmm,
where two unit commanders change. And I said, Chaplain, I'd like you to give the benediction. Uh, and he did, but he started talking about the Christian faith. And chaplains are taught not to do that. They're
hmm,
taught to address all faiths. So I
right,
pulled him aside a little while later. I said, "Hey, chaplain, this is a prayer, not a church service. So let's be careful." And luckily, it was during rehearsal. I said, "You have Muslim soldiers, you have Jewish
yeah,
soldiers, and we had two Sikhs in our formation." I said, "Make sure this applies to everybody." And he goes,
right,
"Yeah, sir, you're right. You're right.
yeah.
I need to change it." So. Yeah.
I feel a little bit like a chaplain in my role because I have to honor everybody that comes through my door.
All leaders
Um,
do,
yep,
right?
yep.
Yeah.
So that's very relevant. So if someone reads your book, what's one leadership principle from all of your amazing letters that you hope they take away from your book?
The requirement for values, for personal values, that, and you know this because we've discussed it in class,
Hmm.
but in order to reinforce who you are and your character, and in order to make the right decisions consistently and with accountability, and to make to have your organization understand what you believe in, I think it's important for every leader to determine what they live by, what they feel is important, what are their individual values. And those also have to match, as you know, the organizational values of the place where you work. So you have to come to grips with, do does what I believe personally intersect with what the organization stands for? And if it doesn't, I mean, you also know that causes a great deal of disconnect. And it's probably not a good fit in an organization if your values don't match the corporation's values. So you probably need to find another job. But it's important for you to live your life according to a set of personal values that give you direction and an approach and help you assess your actions on a daily basis. Do you have integrity? Do you have humility? Are the things that you do respectful of others? I mean, I'm just naming a few, but do you have personal courage that helps you stand up and be counted when you're needed? Those are the kind of things that I think are most important in leadership because it gives your followers a foundation for who you are.
Well, I've wonderfully said for sure.
Well, you've
Uh,
heard it before.
yeah, but it gets better every time. I
Yeah,
promise. Yeah,
it's not a trick question.
it's not. So, your book, If I Don't Return, I feel is more than a book. It really does read as a legacy of love, leadership, faith, and responsibility. I want to thank you for spending time with me on my podcast and talking about the book and leadership. I think the book, if you're a leader out there looking for something that gives you self-awareness, time to reflect on who you are, this is the book for sure. I'm not quite finished, but it's leaving me thinking about me and how I lead every day at Give Kids the World, which is an amazing place. Um, and what I bring to others. So, and I've already spent time with you and I'm still reflecting. So, I really, really encourage those to my listeners that haven't read it, please go read it. It is it's worth your time. Um, so I thank you for your time, Dr. Hertling, and for your service to our country and your continued service to the next generation of leaders at Crummer. It's truly
Well,
been an honor to know you.
well, Sarah, I think you're onto something with this heart model because after hearing about it, I think all the things that I try and describe in the book fit right into that heart, and it will give others a direction on how to lead their life and lead others as well. So thank you for that. Appreciate
Oh,
it.
well, you're welcome. Thank you so much. And
Okay.
for all the others listening, until next time, lead with heart, and the rest will follow. Thank you so much for listening. I'm deeply grateful. My hope is that you leave inspired to lead with compassion, strength, and heart in your work, family, and faith. If today's episode encouraged you, share it with someone who could use a little heart in their day. And be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Until next time, lead with heart, and the rest will follow.